everybody. I had just a little bit of free time. My cat is so stealing the show right now. I had just a little bit of free time between a couple of appointments, and something got bumped. So I wanted to take some time to review a distinction, I guess, in the world, whether you're hiring a virtual assistant or other digital support member, or whether you're thinking about becoming a virtual assistant. And that is, what is the difference between a virtual assistant and an online business manager? Because there can be crossover between these two people in your business, but they also have really distinct roles and they don't always necessarily do the same things. So a virtual assistant is kind of a catch-all term that is used to describe somebody who does general tasks in your business. It could be a mix of personal and business tasks. It could be specifically social media. It could be anything that comes up in the form of a customer service request. All of those different things can end up falling under the umbrella of a virtual assistant. Now, an online business manager is a little bit different. An online business manager is usually a more advanced virtual assistant who is charging more because they are also involved in the strategy or the bigger picture of the business, or even your life, depending on what you're doing and how you're using the person. But a VA will tend to do they'll be willing to do more personal things as well as business stuff, whereas an OBM pretty much handles things at a very high level in the business. So for example, you might have a virtual assistant scheduling your social media posts, whereas you'd have a conversation with your online business manager about the social media strategy that you have and how that is working for the business as a whole. They might be doing pulling analytics on it, giving you some feedback, evaluating your competitors. So there's a little bit, usually a little bit of a higher level there with an online business manager. Now, business managers can work on retainers or they can work hourly. I know many different business managers who will have a retainer of $1,000 or $1,500 a month, and they will usually do pretty much anything that falls into that category. Now, you can't count on having that business manager work for you 40 hours a week. They probably will have multiple clients on that retainer system, and they'll be handling different projects. However, OBMs also tend to prefer working with only a handful of clients at a really deep level. So whereas a virtual assistant could have 10 or even 12 different clients, a business manager chooses to drill down and maybe only works with somewhere between 3 and 5 total. So that's another key distinction. Now, a lot of business managers started out as virtual assistants. So it's not to say that they can't do some of the more basic or administrative tasks that a virtual assistant would handle, but they usually prefer to be doing some of the more high level tasks. So they're kind of like the perfect mix of this high level strategy, big picture sort of thinking, and the ability to do the smaller tasks or to research. Now, an OBM tends to be a little bit more involved in your business, so they'll understand your branding, your marketing strategy, what may or may not work for you. They'll probably be more familiar with how your audience likes to receive information as compared with a virtual assistant, for example. So an OBM is going to be involved in a bigger way. Now, you might still have a VA and an OBM, and they might even be on the same team working for you. So that's certainly the case with me. I have a business manager who helps me. She's basically the second in command for making sure that things are moving forward. She's the one that I trust with a lot of different tasks to get things done. But I also have a virtual assistant who's working on, specifically content creation, like coming up with all of the images for Pinterest and social media. And I even have a Pinterest VA who does only Pinterest. So there are distinctions between those different roles, but the business manager has the experience of a VA. She's had a lot of experience as a VA and has transitioned into being an OBM. So from the perspective of the entrepreneur, how do you know which one you need? If you are just getting started out, this is the first person you're outsourcing to, I recommend you start small and get practice with a VA. Why? Because if you sign a retainer package with an online business manager, and I speak from personal experience here, so learn from my mistakes, there is a chance that you don't know what you're doing and the relationship could fall flat. That could burn you out from ever outsourcing again and end up being a really big mistake for you emotionally as well. Not a good idea to start off with the OBM unless you're experienced with hiring others first. Now, it's also the case that you might hire a virtual assistant who does such a good job that that person grows into the role of OBM, and then you hire someone else to fill those virtual assistant gaps where you need some other tasks handled. So for example, my business manager cannot do everything. So I still have to rely on some other people in the role of virtual assistant to handle a couple of different tasks because she's overbooked. She's doing as much as she can right now. So I still need some other people to help close up those gaps and still keep her working on those high level projects. So those are sort of the key distinctions between a virtual assistant and an online business manager. Usually because of the expense of an OBM and because of the way in which they're involved in somebody's business, you do need to have somewhat of an established business. So if you're just getting started, it might be a little more difficult to bring in an OBM because they're not really clear about how things are going to flow. So when you've been in business for a couple of years, you know how the systems, the processes, the standard operating procedures, the way you like things done, the common problems, the methods by which you distribute your content, you already know all of that. Whereas if you're just starting out, it can actually be pretty frustrating for an OBM if you're the type who's just beginning and you're all over the place. Furthermore, if you don't have the income coming in, it doesn't make sense to be paying for somebody who you can't really afford to support. So something to be very, very mindful of. I don't recommend hiring an OBM until your business can support it. Now, ideally, they are taking things off of your plate so that you can have more revenue generating hours, but there's also going to be some training involved. There's going to be a learning curve involved. So every hour that you pass off to an OBM or to a VA for that matter does not necessarily transition to a money-making hour for you. It might mean you have more time to take off. It might mean that you have to do a little bit of work training them or putting together procedures or project management. But still overall, recognizing that you can't do everything yourself, when it makes sense to hire an online business manager, usually is when you've been established for a little while and you know that you can consistently generate the revenue to pay this person and that you have enough work for them. So let's say you go through the process of hiring an online business manager. They're expecting to work between 5 and 10 hours a week. If you're disorganized and you fall behind and you can only offer them 2 hours of work a week, you run the risk of losing that business manager because you're not holding up your end of the bargain and they're not likely to stay around if they need to really be getting paid at least 5 hours a week to pay their own bills and to plan for their own business. So don't jump the gun and hire somebody too quickly because it could backfire and you could lose this person that you spent time training who might have been a really good fit for your business simply because you didn't give them enough work or you were not organized enough. This happened to me as a project manager last summer. I was brought on to a project where it seemed like everything was really organized, but I was really confused as to why my only point of contact in the business was the CEO. I thought, well, this is weird. This is a multi-million-dollar company. They're very successful. Surely they're delegating, right? They understand project managers. That's what they hired me to do. But because the CEO had it in his mind that he had to train me directly, he didn't have time for that, and there wasn't enough organization to keep up with that. So I would work for 3 hours one week, and then I wouldn't hear from him for 2 weeks. And it wasn't a good fit for me, so I ended that relationship. So something to be mindful of from the client perspective as well. And when you're looking to get hired as an OBM, it's a good idea that you're clear up front about how much work is involved. Now, anyone who runs a business that's going to have launches, launches of a product, a course, a book, etc., there's going to be more work leading up to those than other times. So the way that that's usually dealt with in terms of payment, if the OBM has chosen to go on a retainer, they might receive a portion of the sales. So let's say that they pulled double hours leading up to the launch of a brand new online course. For you as the client, they may be receiving a bonus of some percentage of the profits that are made from that course. So that's just sort of a brief overview. There's a lot of differences and more details that you could go into, but that should sort of help you figure out, first of all, if you want to be a VA or an OBM, or if you're thinking about hiring one, what the differences really are and how they can work within your business.